click this. My guest today is Mark Lapidus at Amadeo, the big leasing company. Mark, it's really great to see you after, 2 years since we last saw each other in Dublin. How's COVID been working for you in your industry?
Well, I think personally, COVID has been a disaster for the planet, but at the personal level, it's been a relief not to travel across an ocean every week or every other week like I had been doing, and I plan not to do it again. So spending time with my family and children at home actually was something I found out I liked doing. But clearly our industry has been more than any other, or as much as any, terribly affected by not traveling. And I think traveling is something that is absolutely essential to what defines us as humans. It is the same as breathing air, eating food, or heating your home. And traveling is a part of human experience, and we need to defend it against the foes that sometimes come out and say, you shouldn't travel anymore, we should go back to the caves and grow our own food. I mean, that will not work. ESG is very part of our thinking, and what we, it feels very strongly about can be done and should be done. But traveling is within that framework, within appreciating that ESG is extremely important and a key. The traveling part of humanity, something is that humanity must defend against those who are willing to see in it just frivolous exercise and some kind of unnecessary holidays. It is what defines us as human beings. It's what drives us. Right. And if I go back into history, Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, written 10,000 years ago, is all about a man going out to defy gods, to define his right to be able to defy gods. If that wasn't too much of a complexity to say in one sentence. So from that point of view, it's sort of been both positive and obviously negative. The interesting thing now that traveling has restarted, and I've gone to see some customers, and customers I've known for a quarter of a century with whom we have very close relationships, where picking up a phone or setting up a Zoom is not a problem to find out what's going on, what needs to be done. What you also discover is that you're losing touch with them. You may still be best friends, but you no longer have the sense of what is important in their daily lives. The key things about your friendship is there, but you are not aware of what's robbing them today, what's happening with them, and what kind of a business you then may choose to do together will escape you if you're trying to do it by phone and by Zoom. So the business travel part of it will come back more strongly than people had, including myself, anticipated before I kind of discovered this with my own experience.
Isn't it incredible that even though your business is intensely industrial, but yet the fundamental thing is that every industry, even if it's selling huge aircraft or dealing with massive amounts of money, in the end, it's a personal business.
It's always going to be a personal business, and it kind of does come back to that core point that the travel is necessary to define who we are from a business point of view, from our own understanding of our relationship with the world, to see how other people do it, and that's essential to understanding who you are, to appreciate how others are doing differently. Going back into classics again, Herodotus and his Trojan Wars is all about going elsewhere, traveling, and recording how others see history. I mean, this is his stories. It's looking at the same things as Greeks of his time were looking at, but with the opposite point of view, and then defining within that opposite point of view differences between us. And differences between us is probably what makes us all human.
I think that's a fabulous insight. That's really amazing. And if I may say, also very encouraging, because I think a lot of us have come out of this and we have an idea of where we are now as human beings now, how important it is to see people. I remember being in Boston 2 weeks ago at the IATA conference. There was one friend of mine, professional friend of mine, that I had not seen obviously in years. We didn't say anything. We just literally walked up to each other, arms wide, and hugged. I'm not an emotional guy, but I felt that was so necessary. I didn't need to say anything. It was just like, I'm so glad to see you, and it was he was the only guy I hugged, but person after person that I hadn't seen for years, there was just this joy.
I had quite a few of those where you just came up and we hugged each other. So I'm with you on that one. But okay, so let me just, I will then add a little bit more what I think is better news as far as I can see it. I think the business travel will come back stronger than anticipated. The number of 30% permanent reduction from my point, which I personally also thought would be the number, I don't see happening any longer because of the experiences that I personally have just gone through and seeing my customers that I haven't seen for a while. I think secondly, there is huge pent-up demand to travel for people who've been locked up for 2 years. But that's rather obvious. But I think thirdly, there is another element to it, and that I think is a big pent-up demand from a bucket list of travelers who are probably premium economy kind of people, if not business seats, who are sufficiently wealthy, who had things in mind to do before COVID, but could not then do it. But now there is an added risk. What if we have another virus, another infection that shuts travel again? So I think that there will be a group of people who, once things reopen, are going to say, we're going to get on that flight. We're going to go to New Zealand or whatever once fancy had been on a bucket list of things to do. And I think that will also drive quite a spectacular rebound in travel on the long haul flights that people may not be anticipating right now, with quite favorable result for probably for the metal that currently is deemed to be unworthy and certainly lost in its ways, like A330s and 777s. But I think there will be quite a bit of a rebound with the way that we've seen post 2001, when there was a shortage of wide body lift. I think that's coming at us. It's coming also because supply chains are stressed. The production rates of the A350s and 787s and 787s have additional problems, are low, and ramping them up will be difficult in this environment of supply chain restrictions. And therefore, I think by the end of 2022, I would really expect to see quite a rebound in aircraft values. And I'm the sort of I'm not the optimistic type, I must say, on this particular topic usually, but I can kind of a sense that from this amalgamation of factors on the demand side and on the supply side, we're going to have an interesting crunch for wide body lift in about 18 months time.
That's another encouraging note. You said it was bad news. I think that's great news.
No, I thought I'd just get it out. But obviously, we want to talk about ESG, and I don't want to spend too much time, but you have me, so I share what I think.
That's great. I've always appreciated these conversations that we've had over the years. The other thing, of course, is that your company made some big news this week.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sort of a stuff off the beaten track has always been something where we, found it very interesting. There are other various reasons why we've been looking at ESG. We always talked about it, I think, in the past. I probably had talked on your program before about these things before it became so fashionable as it has become now. But I think, I think if I were to summarize in a nutshell, and we talked about the human need and right to travel to define itself, I think the aviation industry has been overweight attacked for the production of gases that it releases into the atmosphere, primarily CO2, but obviously there are others. There are NOx emissions. There is carbon dioxide emissions, and attacks have been disproportionate to the amount of pollution the business produces. It's only 2%, a little bit less than that in terms of net emissions. And if you throw all the externalities into it, when you drive to the airport, that will be less than 5% under any calculation. So for this, we're getting quite a bit of flack from the green lobby. And some of the green lobby is nice people. We completely agree with them, but some of them are people that want us to go back to caves and dark ages, and we certainly want to defend ourselves against those calls. There are guys who are calling for no short haul flights in Europe from 2030. That's extreme. That would hit inequality very strongly. It would make it possible for people who have lots of wealth to travel, and it would not allow people others to travel at all, because it would become too expensive, and that is in itself a problem that the industry needs to speak more strongly about and have a positive defense against the attacks on it. In the meantime, the industry also got on with it and made this net promise to be net zero by 2050. I think it's going to be relatively difficult to achieve, if not impossible, but there are elements to that process. And those elements are obviously sustainable aviation fuel. No way by 2050 you can produce enough of it. There is then hydrogen, which currently, I think the world produces hydrogen in the most dirtiest way possible by burning fossil fuels, mixing them with steam and air, and that hydrogen is used in very important productions, like producing ammonia, which then goes into fertilizer that feeds the planet. So I think, as far as I can remember, is about 90 million tons of hydrogen are currently being produced. And on best possible estimates, if you start producing hydrogen from clean electricity by prying out H from HO2, that can maybe increase production by 2050 to 500 million tons of then clean hydrogen, which will not only be just available for aviation, but will go to other transportation and other factories or production sources as well. So those things are kind of the big elephants in ESG space to deliver, and the difficulty will be probably not building the planes that can do it. With sustainable aviation, you can use current propulsion technology. With hydrogen, you have to define fatter planes that can handle 4 times the volume, but ultimately you have hydrogen that gives you the same kind of energy output as does current kerosene. And I think we'll get there in the future, whether 2050, I don't know. But at the same time, there are smaller things that are very exciting, and there is a frenzy of eVTOL activity that's very interesting. And that's sort of the idea that you will have kind of air taxis flying around cities, probably quite further away than people anticipated can happen, primarily because of the fact that to define highways in the street for autonomously operating air taxis will take quite some time from a regulatory point of view. But also there is fixed wing activity, and the fixed wing activity is the one we focused on, and that does not require regulatory changes. It basically can follow the current existing systems, and it can be made to work. And obviously, we all know how planes work with the fixed wing, but some of us are plane enthusiasts. They fly ourselves small planes, like in my case, and sort of the idea that you can have an electrical 2-seater, 4-seater, 19-seater that will operate in a clean way. And with a 19-seater, it's not just electric. We're talking about hybrid electric. So, it's going to be using electrical power to take off, but it will be using the turbine inside, preferably running on sustainable aviation fuel to generate power in cruise. And you need a lot of less power in cruise when you're flying. And we kind of have been looking around the area quite intensively, and we found some people we believe have the idea of what it is they want to accomplish. And there's a bit of a Tesla element in how they're looking at it. It's something that will change the way we probably travel, because we're not necessarily just looking to replace the old Beechcraft 1900s that very few people still have, but which, however, did operate in US fleets for many years in the past. In small regional hubs to small airfields. But I think we're also looking at point-to-point travel, where you can get to a small airfield near you, not just go to Heathrow or Charles de Gaulle or JFK, but a small airfield there near you, and pick up one of these Tesla-like machines that probably initially might have a pilot, but kind of don't need it anymore, because you already have with aviation technology with a fixed wing aircraft. The modern, the new business jets and the new general aviation aircraft have a little button to push if something happens to the pilot, which is called autoland. And the plane, as long as it has digital systems for thrust and auto thrust systems, the plane can go and land itself in the nearest airfield into the wind correctly and communicate with ATC, telling them that it's coming to land. So you do have everything you need to actually have people be able to go on something like 400 nautical mile journeys in the next 5 years, in something that would be like not necessarily personal Tesla car, but shared resource, and avoiding big airports. So that idea is something that we're very excited about, and it's part of sort of what we're looking at with Aura Air that we're working with.
And it's interesting, the vision you just shared now about the eVTOL hubris, I want to say, but I don't want to be rude. Was also shared with me. Roy Genzarski at MagniX in Seattle has the same view of this. He said to me that I suffer from the same thing so many other people in this industry, that I think about the future of the industry like it's been up to now. And that this eVTOL and electrical power enables an entire paradigm shift in your thinking about what is possible. The thing that intrigues me is we know that, for example, in regional flying, 50-seaters aren't popular because the economics are upside down. So there's
except if you have an electrical unit, its economics are upside up.
Right, but you cannot get to 50 seats. You can only get to maybe 19, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think we're focusing initially on a 19-seat design because also, in designing aircraft up to 19 seats, you have a different standards. Nothing wrong with the standards, but the simple difference would be, instead of having to, withstand in your windshield impact of 2 frozen turkeys at 200 knots airspeed, you just have to withstand the 1 frozen turkey. Right. So so the 19-seaters have different design characteristics which allow it to be reasonable for the purposes of what it is. And you want to stay within that framework to be successful. Otherwise, you're building small aircraft, but you have to subject it to the rules that are a lot more frozen turkeys thrown at it.
But Mark, if we look at the capacity, let's round it off to 20 seats. You're going to need 2.5 of those to do the mission of 150-seater. How much more space is there in the sky to fit all this extra traffic? Particularly when we have these eVTOLs, what we're going to be doing is taking traffic off the street, putting it in the sky. I mean, the is getting bigger.
I think there's clearly a space, and I flew yesterday from a small airfield near Salon in France, Salon-Aiguères, gliders there primarily, VFR airfield, no approach, actually no tower, nobody to talk to. You self-announce into the frequency of what you're doing, and you kind of get on with it. And then got picked up for an RFR approach into Nice, where I was able to catch a Delta 767-400 to come to New York. And there is clearly space because, from lifting off at 9 in the morning, I didn't see a single aircraft outside of my window, although I could see some somewhere on my screens showing up, but there was no traffic that was really, really close to me in what is busy airspace around Nice. I think there is plenty of space there, and the procedures for separating traffic via IFR are very clearly defined. And they also have lots of airfields from which you can have clearly established routing processes going in and going out, which is currently already exists for all the IFR flights. But I can see an easygoing future where people will be able to go from, let's say, London or New York to Hamptons, not necessarily, putting eVTOL aside, because for eVTOL, you need the ability to fly in between the city blocks. That is something yet to be done, and will take some time for that to occur. We kind of optimistic about eVTOL, particularly I like the model Airbus rolled out last month. It's a 4-seater with 8 propellers and no moving surfaces. It's limited in scope. It's limited to about 80 kilometers speed and 80 kilometer range, and that to me is kind of a probably sinks. I know there are much more ambitious projects for amazing machines that will lift off vertically, then turn themselves into fixed wing aircraft and fly 200 knots for 200 nautical miles. That probably could be made to work, but that is very challenging. But the simpler things, which are large drone-like machines that we see operating very comfortably, producing very little noise, I think are doable in eVTOL space. And we're also trying to work and find the right partner in that activity. But some of the stuff is, as you say, looks a little bit, too optimistic to get there. But with the fixed wing, there's clearly space to land at multiple airports. Like in the US, there are so many very properly constructed manned airfields that are everywhere. US is wonderful for that. The general aviation, corporate aviation in the US is just exemplary. But even around London and UK, there are tons of airfields that are slowly atrophying because there hasn't been enough general aviation activity. Some of them being built into apartment blocks, but some of them are quite active, quite live. and there is tons of space to operate out of those, and it's going to be a very pleasant experience. You're going to come to a small airfield. There will be something like a container kind of a box, which will be your security process if it's a 19-seater. And you get into an airplane that maybe will have a pilot, but predominantly will fly by itself, and down the road will not need a pilot. That will feel like getting into Tesla with cool kind of doors, and it will take you to your destination 100% ESG or nearly so. And you probably will feel good about it, and you will like the idea that you're avoiding large airport where you had to queue through security and go through all the normal stuff that you would when you're going on a big hub somewhere.
An amazing vision.
I think it's not far away.
You know, as I'm pondering what you're saying, this is just the last thought here, that the poster child for this kind of activity is Sao Paulo. They have more helicopters per capita there than anywhere else in the world, because people don't want, it's not safe to drive, and it's not, you know, carjackings, whatever. So that for many people in this industry, what's happening in Sao Paulo is going to be the sort of petri dish for the rest of us.
A bit, but I think the regulatory framework will be kind of a more globally rolled out on the same basis with everybody. I don't think the major kind of regulatory jurisdictions will rush this through. They will take time to find the right way so that we don't have something stupid happening and ugly incidents that are avoidable occur. So I think the sort of the framework of allowing, you know, in between the city blocks operations, currently with helicopters, you have helicopter rules for low VFR flying, you know what they are.
Sure.
Yes, you can follow those if you have a product right now that can get certified. But for kind of a mass market of that to come, you need much broader regulatory revision to allow for unmanned vehicles to operate with their own ability to, you know, find their way. Technology for that would currently already work. It's kind of not something that is futuristic, but the framework of how it would happen is yet unclear. But in terms of kind of a more simplistic designs for eVTOL aircraft, I think the whole thing works. Just buy yourself a drone with 4 engines and play with it, and that shows you how stable and maneuverable these things can be without any flying surfaces that are moving. And you know, I see the same. I see kind of the winners in the eVTOL area being those guys to begin with, and you know, best of luck to the more ambitious ones, but they certainly have, you know, full-on technology challenge as well by converting vertical takeoff with also then a fixed wing performance over longer distance.
Wonderful to talk with you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Edison, my pleasure. Always good to see you.